You are listening to the unscripted, unfiltered, 100% authentic podcast. I'm your co host, Michael, and joining with me is the author of Spies on the Sidelines. He's a Army veteran with over 20 years of experience safeguarding and gathering information for the Department of Defense, the Department of Defense, including 13 years as a special agent, during which he conducted national security investigations and instructed federal agents in training. And of course, he's a graduate from the University of California, Santa Cruz, with a BA in history, graduated in top honors from American Military University. Without further ado, it's my honor to finally get Mr. Kevin Bryant. Kevin, it's been I know it's because some reschedule here and there, but it's an honor to have you on the show. And first things first, coming from a military veteran, not a veteran, but a military family. My grandfather's flag is right next to me. More importantly, thank you for your service. It's truly much appreciated.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're welcome. And thanks a bunch for having me on the show. Appreciate it.
Hey, I'm looking forward to it. And tell the listeners out there a little about yourself. And of course, going from Army veteran to working in the Department of Defense, and of course, writing a book on Spies on the Sidelines. We'll obviously dig more into that here shortly. Tell the listeners a little about yourself.
Yes, I think you hit most of the highlights. So I spent eight years in the Army, and ever since then, I have been working for the Army as a civilian. And I guess I was living in Germany at the time, and got real interested in everything to deal with Spygate, and then Spygate 2, when Josh McDaniels moved over, became the head coach of the Broncos.
Oh, yes.
Yep. He was formerly the Patriots offensive coordinator, I think, as most of us know. And, the Broncos got in trouble for taping another team's practice during that period. And being a Broncos fan, I just really got wondering, wow, I wonder, is this, are these incidents just, something that happens once every 3, 4, 5 years, and, we read about them and that's it? Or is this endemic of, a bigger underlying issue? Or, just is there a lot more collection that's going out there in the NFL that no one is really aware of? So, I set out to at least answer that question for myself, if I could. And somewhere along the line, I realized that no one had written a book on the topic. I had wanted to write one for a long time, and I was like, you know what? I just got to go all in and try to make this happen. So I spent 8 years researching and writing this book, doing a lot of things in the middle, obviously working a full-time job, getting a couple master's degrees, and then also, I was coaching soccer, doing all that kind of stuff, and traveling around Europe, both for work and pleasure. So, man, it took a long time, but it was a labor of love. So, and now I'm finally sitting here and talking to you about it.
Hey, well, it's an honor to have you. And of course, kind of looking at it, obviously, you said it took you about 8 years roughly, and 8 years to get everything, to get your book written and everything else. How did you manage your time? Obviously, coaching to 2 master's degrees, of course, a family and full-time job. What was your best time management, and how did that kind of work into your lifestyle?
Yeah, so I really don't waste a lot of time.
Very nice.
I've got a type A personality, and it's funny. I grew up. My dad was a Navy officer, and he has a definite type A personality. And I was living in around Los Angeles and Santa Barbara, California, and I was just this cool, relaxed, soccer player / surfer. And I was like, man, I'm never going to be like my dad. Sometime around, I guess, late high school, early college, it kicked in, and I was been that way ever since. So, I like to do a lot of things. There's a lot of things I want to do in life. And so I find that, it's tough though, especially when you got a family. I've got a wife and a kid, and obviously, they demand a lot of a lot of time, and rightfully so. So I've got to be very careful about that balance of making sure I give them enough time while still pursuing, my hobbies and my interests and my passions. So it's a challenge. I mean, what it really means for me is I don't have as much time to just chill as I would like. But there's trade-offs to everything in life. So
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think, I applaud that. I think I was on a Twitter space last night, and Wong kind of mentioned a good buddy of mine. And he's another one to definitely get on his. And we talked about, making a name for yourself, continue to pursue goals, even though you have not so much of a busy schedule, but, we all have lives, of course, full-time jobs, marriages, kids, what have you. And, or even, single parents out there. Obviously that's, a task in itself, but how far after your military life, how long did it take after you left the army, I should say, till you decided that you want to write the book? And if it was during your military career, how was it kind of juggling that along with trying to get everything kind of ready to per se in your book?
Well, so I was out of the military, but having said that, I mean, I literally hopped out of the military, became a civilian, and was working in the same office within a few months later. So, it wasn't all that different. And frankly, the demands that I experienced as a civilian were probably just as great as when I was in the military, because I was still deploying. I was still doing all the same stuff I was doing before, just wearing a different set of clothes.
Absolutely.
Really. Yep. So so yeah, I mean, it was very challenging. I guess, moving to Germany was great because I had deployed, I would say, 4 times in about 6 years.
Wow.
As a soldier and then as a civilian. And then moving to Germany, I didn't have to deploy anymore, which was fantastic and great. I was in a staff position. I was overseeing things and kind of in charge of running programs as opposed to doing stuff, which was great. But yeah, I mean, working 2 master's degree right then. I was coaching the girls' high school soccer team. I was the president of United States Youth Soccer for a chapter. I was coaching 2 of those teams, which were Olympic development feeder programs.
Wow.
I was traveling all throughout Europe for work, and it was, and then writing a book, on top of it all, because why not?
Right. Exactly. Just keep it going.
Keep tossing more on there. I guess what I would say is, looking back at it, it was kind of foolish. It was too much, it really was. And there's just so much stuff I wanted to do and I loved. There's only so many times, I'm a big soccer enthusiast and I love playing soccer. I played NCAA ball. I love coaching. I knew, it's very hard to get a high school coaching job unless you work for a high school. And it kind of just fell in my lap. And and I was like, man, I really love it. And it's hard to just say no. And the same thing kind of happened with all the other soccer stuff. And by the end of it, my wife was just kind of like, Kevin, this is stupid, man. You got too much stuff going on. And I did. So I've pared down now. But of course, promoting the book is a whole nother beast in and of itself that consumes just as much time as all of that together. So I guess what I would say is, you got to do a little prioritization. You have to, you got to be willing to put the family first when push comes to shove, and just say, you know what? I no longer have time for this. Like, I'm no longer playing soccer, which absolutely kills me because I'm a diehard soccer guy. And I just had to say, you know what? I've got to drop something. And so, I had to prioritize it. And I think, I don't regret that. But yeah, life's full of tough choices.
Understandable. And looking at your, I ordered it and hopefully you get here shortly, but Um, Spies on the sideline. Of course, we all think, the incident with New England. New England's pretty much the ball game, if you will, or the inflate ball game. But anyway, you look at New England, of course, other things. You look at everything. Was it your thinking about how I'm going to write a book, I'm going to do this? Was it literally the Spies on the sideline? Was that your intention of writing that as your first book, or did you have other intentions, but this one really just hit the nail on the coffin, so to speak?
Yeah, what I really wanted to write was fiction. I
Very nice.
love fantasy. I'm
Hmm.
a big like Robert Jordan fan, Brandon Sanderson. Um, so I wrote a book and I submitted it to a publisher. And yeah, the results weren't good. To be frank, I just
Right.
kind of gotta like, okay, thanks for submitting. Um, and so I just let the whole idea of writing a book drop for like 5 years because I looked at it later and I looked at some of the comments I got back and I was like, man, they're right. And I really need to rewrite this whole thing. And if you've ever spent 2 years of your life working on something to realize that you pretty much just need to crumple that up and start over, it's hard to do. It's really hard to do.
I can imagine.
Right.
I can imagine.
So I was just like, you know what, forget this. I forget it, And so I let it go for like 5 years. And then I worked on my master's and I wrote my thesis for, intelligence studies. And I really liked the way it turned out. And I was like, man, that's really good. I was like, I could see this being a book if I stretch this out and whatnot. I didn't want to really go that route. But it got me into writing again. And I realized that I was a much better nonfiction writer than I was fiction. It just suited my talents. And so, when the idea of, for Spies on the Sidelines came around, I was just like, you know what, I'm going to give this a try. And I started writing it, and, I was pushing the some rough drafts by friends and family and all that kind of stuff, and the feedback I was getting was really positive, like, man, this is a cool subject, this is really neat. And and I could just tell it was, the feedback I was getting from that was much better than I ever got from the the fiction book I was writing. And I was like, okay, I see, I can tell the difference. I can see, I can feel it. So I just kept on trucking, kept on doing it.
That's awesome. And it kind of leads to the question that I think a lot of people, I guess in a way you can evaluate, but don't. When it came in your instance, negativity, and we see a lot of it nowadays, not so much in the sports world, but just in our own lives, we see it, it depends on the circumstance, but a lot of things going on in the world that can be really negative. But when it came to getting the book started, getting everything rolling from step one even up to now, how did you handle negativity when it came to this whole process?
Yeah. So, first of all, I tried to make this a work of fun, enjoyment, right? I've got a full-time job. Like I didn't need the book, for any financial reasons whatsoever.
Right.
So I was just like, you know what? I'm going to work on this when I want to work on this, because I think if you do something that you're not passionate about and you're not having fun, it's never going to be as good, right? You're like, it's like, I got to do this today. I got to type. If you set yourself like a limit, like I've got to type 3 pages today. Okay. I think it's going to reflect in your book eventually. And so there were probably periods of 4, 5, 6 months where at one time I just set it aside. I was like, you know what? I got a lot going on. I'm busy. I'm just not feeling it. I don't want to do this right now. And I didn't. So, it went through pretty well up until the 6th year mark, which is when I first submitted the book to a literary agent. And, trying to find an agent is a very stressful thing, because in each genre that you're writing, there are only so many literary agents out there. Okay. So for sports, there's probably, I don't know, probably about 50 or so that you're going to find. And if 50 pass on you, guess what? That means you're not getting an agent. And if you don't get an agent, you're not getting a publisher. That's just the reality these days, right? So I probably was through about 30 of them. You know, just you don't get any feedback. You don't get anything back when you submit. Okay, for the most part. I finally got one guy who got back to me, and he said, "Kevin, I you know, he requested the manuscript. I sent it to him. He read it, and he was real close to taking it. He's like, Kevin, I read this thing like 3 times, and I'm not going to take it. But I'd like to have a phone conversation with you to tell you why." And so he was kind enough to sit down with me and to talk all about the book and what he recommended to be able to get it published. And it entailed basically getting a lot more contemporary material and starting each chapter with a long anecdote, you know, a 3 or 4 page story to kick off each chapter. And I was like, oh, great. Well, that just, you know, I'll only have to read 20 more new books. I'll only have to, you know, write about 100 new pages for the book, and then I'll be done, right? And I was just like, oh my God, this is, you know, this is a disaster. And I didn't want to listen to him. You know, I put the book down for like a month at that point after I heard that. But, you know, eventually I came to see, you know, he's right, is the bottom line. And he knows what he's doing. He's a professional. He's been doing this stuff for a bazillion years. And so I just had to, you know, the theme of my book is whatever it takes. And at some point I had to adopt that for myself. And with only 20 literary agents left to go that I could possibly submit to, and of course he said send it back to him if he had a chance, but I knew there was a chance that I've only got 20 guys. So man, I had to make this thing like as good and polished as it could possibly be. So literally every day I would just be working on, be like, whatever it takes, man. I don't care. Like I've got to make sure like my word choice is perfect. My diction, you know, as good as can be. The sentence structure, it's great. I've got to make sure the stories are as tight as can be. I got to make the flow of everything just perfect, because I knew I literally had 20 people out there that were going to decide whether I got published or not. And it was very possible that everybody was going to pass. And so I sent it back to the first agent, and he was like, Kevin, congratulations. This book is awesome. But I'm only taking one new author this year. That's it. And I'm going to hold out. And I was like, oh, great. But he said, but you're going to get published. That's the good news. And I said, yeah, okay.
Wow.
So I started submitting it again and all of that. And I got to I had about 10 agents left on that list that I could submit to. When someone said, hey, I like this. Yeah, let's do it. I was like, oh, thank you. Thank you. Because man, I mean, you talk about nerve-wracking. I mean, it really is. It's a very stressful process to go through and look for an agent. Yeah. So
was there any, you know, I've never written a book and I don't know if I ever will, but was there any, let's say, doubt? Was there any doubt in your mind, like this may not ever work out? Or did you just have that belief that somebody's going to pick this up? We just got to be patient.
Well, Mike, so the reality is that 99% of books that are submitted to an agent, to a literary agent, they don't succeed. They never find a literary agent, and they never get traditionally published. Okay. So you're looking at really steep odds. Wow. And you have to be realistic with yourself of saying that. Having said that, I just said, I don't care.
Right.
I just don't care. I understand those were the odds. And I had a few things working in my favor. You know, the topic is pretty cool. It's, you know, the book applies. The cool thing is Spies on the Sidelines. It applies to every team. Every team is involved in collection activities, you know, whether it is, you know, permissible techniques, controversial techniques, or techniques that are flat out illicit, meaning that they violate NFL rules or bylaws. So I knew writing this book, I had a book that applied to every NFL team, which was, okay, that's a big seller. Espionage. Everybody, you know, I mean, pretty much everybody loves a good spy book or movie, right?
Absolutely.
And I combined the two, and it's an original idea. No one's ever done anything like it. So, and I had the background, you know, I've got 23 years now protecting and collecting information for the Department of Defense, all the special agent background. So I knew I had some some hopes,
Right.
some things that the average person didn't have, the average writer didn't have when going after a book. So I just said, you know what? I don't care. I'm just going to believe in myself and go all in, and if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. And you know what? Life goes on. But I just had to tell myself, you know what? Like, I've always been a cocky little brat. I think I attribute it to soccer because, I think if you're ever good at one thing, and soccer was that thing for me growing up.
Yes, sir.
That I was always really good at. And I think once you develop that one thing in life, you can apply it to everything. I wasn't a great student in most of high school. I kind of turned it on late in the game. But you know what? When I decided to turn it on, because I felt really stupid when I saw my wife's report card, my girlfriend at the time, and she was like
Right.
a 4.4 student, and I was like, oh, I was like, oh, okay. I was like, I better get my act together. And so, but I had that confidence, that, okay, I can do this. And I just applied it to writing, when it came time for that. And, I think that's just something, you just have to have in life. You just have to be, just have to believe that you can, because if you don't have that belief, no matter what it is that you're trying to do, you're not going to get there. And so you just got to jump in.
It's funny, but in a good way that you brought that up. A week or two ago, Wong and I hung out. He's a good friend, hosted the Funny Moments, and literally, I told him because there was, talking about jobs, stuff like that, and just life in general. Is sometimes you got to get out of your comfort zone in order to take that step. Whether regardless if it was in your case, writing the book, my case, certain things here and there, change of degrees, career paths, such and such, and so on and so forth. And so sometimes, in order for us to grow personally, not just within ourselves and boost our confidence, I said sometimes we got to step out of our comfort zone. And I really like when you said that, hey, I'm going all in. I'm going to do whatever it takes to get this out there. And hey, whatever I got to do, I got to do. And I like that because it shows that, a lot of people, they assume like they play the role of, well, if I don't get this by a certain day, we're just going to, toss our hands, throw in the white towel and call it a day. But I love your mentality. And that's something that, even past this show, I'm going to keep in my head, like, hey, just go all in, do what, literally do. I'm going to do whatever it takes to get wherever I got to go. And I applaud that.
Yeah. Thanks. That's the theme of my book is whatever it takes. It was a phrase that was used by Al Davis and Chuck Noll, both some of the great coaches in NFL history. And, the one thing I saw researching the book was that all of these NFL teams that are winning championships, right? A lot of them are using some of the controversial, okay, or plain illicit techniques. You look at like coaches like, George Halas, who's considered like one of the founders of the NFL and the first coach of the Bears, Vince Lombardi, Al Davis with the Raiders, Sid Gilman with the Chargers, obviously Bill Belichick, nowadays, Weeb Ewbank with the Jets. These are guys, you look at how many championships that these coaches together won. And I was just like, these are the guys that are getting it done because they are willing to go all in, and it may be by tactics that a lot of fans would find kind of repulsive. But at the same time, what I read, like with Al Davis, who I kind of despised being a Broncos fan before I researched the book.
Yep.
But, after researching him, especially when he was in his prime, he was so good, but he wanted to win so bad. Like he just put it all out there every single day. And, I got done and I was just like, man, I got mad respect for this guy now. Like he,
absolutely,
he was just willing to do whatever it takes. And, and I love that. And I think a lot of people now with Belichick, they're just like, if you're not a Patriots fan, man, you pretty much despise that guy, right?
Absolutely.
But I think that's because he's a current coach. I think when people read about him 20, 30 years from now that, didn't grow up in this era, they're going to look back and be like, oh, that dude was pretty cool. He was like an Al Davis. He was just a guy who was willing to do whatever it took. And man, there's some really cool stories about what he did and what he was willing to do. And I think those guys, they add a lot of flavor to the NFL. And, is as disheartening, I think, as it is at times, when these guys are doing their stuff. It's they do it because they love the game. They want to stick around the game, and obviously they want to be successful. And I mean, as much I've got some respect for it as much as I do some feelings of a little hole in the pit of my stomach too. Yeah.
Of course, has nothing to do with the book, but you brought it up, so I'm going to ask you anyway. I'm a fellow Broncos fan as well.
Oh, nice. Great.
I want to get your thoughts on Denver's new quarterback, of course, Russell Wilson.
Mm-hmm.
And what are from your personal standpoint on the 2022 season, what the expectations should be?
Yeah, so AFC West this year, first of all, is brutal. So, it's a tough division to figure out who's going to, I think the Chiefs are still the team to beat, obviously. Mm-hmm. The question is, who else makes the playoffs? And I think you're going to have 3 teams coming out of the AFC West that make the playoffs. The question is, who's the team that's left out, right? Because you got, right. The Chargers, the Raiders, and the Broncos are all looking pretty solid. Love having Russell Wilson in there. I think, he brings it. He gives a whole new dimension to the game. He's a clear upgrade on what the Broncos had before. And he brings a ton of leadership. And I think we've seen that in the offseason already with, Russell Wilson's going to give everything that he has to the game. And I think he's got a motto of give 4 times more than what anybody asked for him. So if they ask him to throw, 25 of a certain pass, he's going to throw 100 of those, and you got to love that and you got to respect it. And that's contagious. And we've already seen that with the players that are around him, just willing to give more and spend more time. So if nothing else, I think that'll bring a lot to the game. And I think we're also going to see the effect that we had with Peyton Manning, to a certain degree. Obviously, not quite the same level as a Peyton Manning. But,
exactly, right.
He was able to bring in a lot of talent that were just like, hey, Peyton Manning, I want to go play Peyton Manning. And I think we're going to see now players go, oh, Russell Wilson. Sure. Mm-hmm. Especially when the Broncos have some success this season, which I expect they will. We're going to see, some talent come to Denver that we couldn't attract before because there's that aura around Wilson and the wins that are going to ensue because of it. So, I would say comfortably the Broncos are going to be, I want to say 10-7 or better. I would expect a 10-7 or 11-6. I think that's, if the AFC West wasn't so strong, I might say a little better, but I think that's probably realistic. I think they'll manage to get a playoff spot, whether that's the probably a wild card spot would be my guess. And, then once you're in the playoffs, it's all about who's peaking and who's healthy. And, I don't think this is going to be a Super Bowl year, but I'm excited. I think it'll be a fun season for the Broncos.
No, I'm with you. I think that, and I mentioned it not just on here, but on a podcast I was on, the Herb and Raj podcast not too long ago, and pretty much, Herb asked, what's the expectation should be like in Denver? I said, pretty much like you said, I think we make the playoffs regardless of what our record is. Probably not so much division winners, but if we get to the playoffs, I mean, I don't expect the Super Bowl this year. I think next year is probably more realistic, but I mean, like you said, it's all about who's hot and who's cold in the playoffs. And if you get that one special run, I mean, you never know. So, no, I'm with you. I think it's gonna be an exciting time in Denver. I know I'm excited. It's about time we have a quarterback that we can really rely on now from the last six years, and I can't remember how many quarterbacks we've gone through, but no, it'll be it'll be a fun time nonetheless.
Yeah. It's just nice to have that position filled. Check that box. Done. Thank God. Yeah.
Yep. No, I'm 100% on it. But no, so going back to the book, how many hours? And the reason why I ask this is obviously you're a big soccer person. Growing up, did you watch much football growing up, or was soccer really your go-to sport? I know some say, whatever, but some people it's soccer. I'm starting to learn the game, so I'm a new freshie to that one. But
Okay.
is soccer your main sport growing up, or did you actually watch some football growing up?
Yeah, so growing up, I think I started soccer when I was 5 or 6,
Very nice.
and I was pretty much playing year round, 2 to 3 hours a day, through college.
Awesome.
So having said that, I didn't start watching professional soccer until about high school. But even then, watching U.S. soccer I was like, I mean, it's not pretty, a lot of times. And so it really wasn't until the English Premier League became a big thing over here in the States, which was, well, really when I came back from Germany like 6 years ago, I was like, what the heck? English Premier League's everywhere. Like, this is awesome,
Right.
Because I, living in Germany, I'd watch Bundesliga games or Champions League games, and that was great. But until then, I was pretty much, I grew up watching football, and I think I became a Broncos fan about 6th or 7th grade, awesome. And I watched them pretty religiously all growing up, all throughout the the Elway years.
Oh yeah.
All of that, and that's always been my main sport, I would say, to watch on TV. I'm a Manchester United fan for soccer. Now that I can watch that a bit more, it's great and it's nice, and I watch a lot of both. But I'll tell you, man, writing a book, I don't have the time to watch. Like, I'll still watch all the Broncos games.
Right.
I'll catch the Man U games that I can find on TV. But other than that, I don't really have time to watch sports anymore. And sometimes, like, I'm taping games because I'm like, I don't even have time to watch the full 3 hours. I'm like, I've got time to watch, the hour and 15 minutes it takes me to fast forward through everything and see
exactly
see the play. And that's all I got. And that's just where I am in life right now. So I would love just to be able to, sit down with some nachos and a nice refreshment and just chill out and laze about and watch 3 hours of football. But I don't have that time anymore. I wish I did.
No, I know the feeling. It's I always tell people, because well, what can you do? I'm like, some days it's just how it rolls, and at the end of the day, I got more important things. I gotta, higher priorities, and those memories you definitely cannot take back. So, no, I totally get it. When it came to research, and of course, I'm excited. I'm looking forward to reading your book. When it came to researching, I'm sure it's a lot of hours. How many hours and books that you can recall that you went through, literally getting this book to where, as I call it, perfectionist to your standards? How many hours and books did it take, if you can remember?
Well, if I stack all my books up, I'm looking over there because I'm looking at all my books. I'm guessing it's probably about somewhere between 10 and 12 feet high. I've got books that I read. So, I think I went through at least 60 books for this in research. It was a lot of time, man. And the thing that was really tough about researching this book is, so no one had ever written a book on the subject of spying in the NFL, other than Brian O'Leary, who wrote a book on Spygate, right?
Right.
But I wanted to write a book that was about all the techniques the teams use, that encompassed every single team and that spanned the entire history of the league. So no one had ever done this, right? And so I'm like, okay, I've got basically 3 ways to go. One is the internet, which I've exhausted over and over and over. I mean, gosh, sometimes I spent hours just looking for a new article, and I'd find one. I'd be like, oh, yes, I spent 2 hours to find one article. Like, it's just ridiculous. Like, but I'd read these books, and some books I'd read an entire one, 300, 400 pages. And I'd be like, yep, nothing at all. And I'd be so frustrated, and then sometimes I'd find a book that had, 3 or 4 pages, and I'd be like, oh, it's a gold mine, 3 or 4 pages of material I can use, and oh my gosh. So it was a struggle. It took, there's a reason it took 8 years to put this thing together. It did. And, and interviews were obviously, they were great, but they're hard to get because you're going after NFL players or coaches that they're hard to track down and get a hold of. One, they're tough to get a hold of. Two, they're guys that make a lot of money and are very, very busy. So, and I'm an unpublished author at this point. So, like, hey, would you like to do an interview with some random dude who's never published a book, who might get published one day, I hope. And, and then talk about a really sensitive subject that no one wants to talk about, because either A, it's giving away trade secrets on how they collect and protect information, right? And then even if they don't want to talk about their own team, do you want to talk about another team that, you may taint somebody's legacy, or you may get somebody in trouble with the league because of them using, these shady, duplicitous techniques? No, man, trying to get interviews was tough. And I managed, I got some. I had to give people anonymity to feel comfortable to be able to do these things. But it was a lot of time for everything. It was a lot of work for all of it. It was a challenge. So I'm really happy with the way it turned out. Having said that, I'm writing a second book on spying in college football right now. And being a published author opens so many doors. Once you can throw your, hey, I'm Kevin Bryant, and I am with, Roman and Littlefield, my publishing company. It's like, oh, you're legit. Oh, you've got a website, you've got a publishing company behind you, you've got all this kind of stuff. And now when I ask, for the college book, hey, are you willing to do an interview? Man, it's so much easier. It's so much easier. I would say, first of all, I have people coming to me saying, hey, would you like to interview me? Which is like, that still blows my mind. But when I do find people that I'm interested in speaking to them specifically, I find roughly half the time it's just like, oh yeah, sure, yeah, let's do it. And that's a way higher percentage than I was used to for the first book. So it's very refreshing.
Well, you answered my next question, where we see the second part, so to speak, of your book, and looking forward to that one. And I can only imagine the research and information you're going to get out of this one. I'm sure, especially now with everything that's how big college football is getting, I can just imagine what you're going to find out and
it's really
about.
It's really cool being able to talk to the coaches. So I'm getting firsthand information sometimes. I got one coach who was just like, hey, do you want, we collected on another team's signals, and we put it all together in a PowerPoint presentation with, here's the signal, here's the corresponding play it comes down to. We're talking about, signals with a big name coach that they were, going after and it figured out, and he's like, and I've got a 6 or 7 page PowerPoint presentation for you. You can have it, you can use it in your book, you can, so, I'm like, oh, this is awesome. This is great. So it's really nice to be at this point where, information's just being, kind of thrown in my lap. And I'm like, yeah, this is good. This is easy. I love it.
I like that teaser, by the way. I'll have to save that clip and use that as a teaser.
There you go.
Especially for you. With that being said, of course, are we going to see a third book? Because we're hearing about a lot about the Houston Astros and baseball. Could we see a potential baseball down the road?
So, I've got a list of all of my potential next books coming out, and I've probably got like 6 or 7 ideas on that list.
Nice.
I haven't said that. Anytime you're writing a nonfiction book, especially if you're working a full-time job,
right,
with all the research that comes behind it, it takes a long time. I got lucky for the second book because when I was going through, after I probably read 4 or 5 books, I realized, you know what, dummy, you might want to write a college football book after this. And I'm finding a lot of really good college football stories. So when I was highlighting material for the NFL stories, I just used a different color highlighter for all the college stuff.
Oh,
so
sweet.
When I was, when I was done and said, hey, I'm ready to start writing the second book, all I did was go to those books and start sucking that material out and put it in a Word doc. So it made the research process much quicker for the second book. having said that, for the third book, when I'm starting from scratch again, it's going to take a while. And I really haven't made up my mind what I want to write on. I've got a lot of ideas. The baseball book is one.
Mm-hmm.
I will say that. But having said that, when it comes to, I don't think I will do another spying in sports book. And the reason for that is because football is very unique in that, with baseball is the closest thing to football when it comes to spying, because you do have, set plays coming in from a third party. Okay. Meaning that you have a catcher that is giving you, the pitcher, a signal on what play is coming up. And as we all know now, right, you have the possibility to steal that signal, whether it's being recorded or whether it's, the third base coach that's, relaying that in, or whatever it might be. Yes, you can steal that signal potentially. Having said that, it's not the same as football. Okay, so football, you've got 11 players on the field that, an offense or defense, that is what each member of the team is going to do on offense is fully scripted for the most part. And man, that's kind of crazy. So you think about free-flowing sports like basketball, soccer, all that. Yes, you can spy on a team's practice, for example, but what is that going to give you? Okay, yeah, you may learn what a play, how a player likes to take certain free kicks, or which way a certain player likes to kick penalty kicks. But at the end of the day, you're not going to get that much, right? Because the coaches don't control the game. The players control the game. In football, coaches control that game, right? And even if a player, such as a quarterback, calls an audible to change the play, it's still switching to a fully scripted play. And so there is so much more potential for collection in football than in any other sport that is out there. So I think that's the reason that football is very different. And so while there is stuff in, baseball and other sports, I kind of feel like, it would be a challenge to come up with enough material for any other sport. And I just don't want to, press it. I don't want to go, I spent 3 years, researching this book to go, yeah, there's not enough for it. And
exactly. No, I completely understand.
Yeah. But yeah, I know there's a lot of passionate baseball guys. I know a lot of people would like to see that book. I just don't think it's going to happen.
No, I know, of course, baseball, being the biggest one is Houston, but no, I'm sure, I'm sure other sports do it. But like you said, is there enough research and is there enough information? You don't know. And obviously, it takes a lot of time. And like you said, you may get to that fourth year, third year and be like, we're done. And
right. Yeah. And to be honest, I'm not a big baseball guy. I'm just not, I'm not passionate about the sport. And I think anytime, I love football. I love the NFL. I love my Broncos. So, I've got that passion for it. So it makes it easy, when you're struggling and, just to get the energy up to do it. It's sometimes it's tough, even with a sport you love, much less I try to imagine that with baseball, which isn't a sport I love, and trying to write about that. I think that'd be a challenge.
I still think baseball needs to shorten their season. I think it's too long.
Yeah, it's
too long to keep up with.
It's tough to get up for every game. And I had an uncle who did, and he loved it and he lived it all the time. And I felt the exact same way. I was like, why do you care what happens in game, number 85 of the season? I was just like, this thing it's just so long. Yeah.
As we wrap up, is there any, how should I word this without giving out like the real games? Is there any teasers when it comes to Spies on the Sidelines that you like to give out there, even just a minor one to all the listeners, so they I can help market this book for you?
Yeah. Hey, if you don't mind, Mike, if you got like a minute, I'll read you a paragraph. I'll read a paragraph out from the book. So
go ahead.
This is kind of like my paragraph that more or less kind of sums up all the crazy stuff that is in the world of NFL espionage. All right. While the phrase three-letter agency is a euphemism for American spook organizations such as the CIA and the NSA, The NFL is a three-letter agency in its own right. Behind the game day action of the NFL is a world much like the cloak and dagger realm of American intelligence agencies. The NFL has its own history, filled with espionage-related stories that sound like something right out of the Cold War. Spies disguised as reporters, military officers, and priests, and even a dwarf playing the role of a baby being pushed in a stroller. That's a crazy story, by the way. Covert surveillance of targets' movements, hiding draft prospects by shuffling them in and out of hotels and aliases, tapped telephones, signals interception, decoy signals, encryption, code breaking, and radio frequency jamming, false flag operations, monitoring air traffic and airline passengers, spies scaling rooftops and telephone poles, and clandestine photography undertaken from high-rise hotels with long-lensed cameras, peepholes, secret listening devices, surveillance photos relayed by zipline, and whispered conversations masked by running water, stolen documents, and trash cans sifted for secrets, subversion of individuals mired in debt, and a hilltop secured by Navy SEALs. So, yeah, that's part of the crazy world of all the fun spying adventures in the NFL.
I'm excited about this one. This one's really going to be interesting. This one's going to be a good one.
Yeah, I hope you enjoy it. I think anybody who's a real football buff will enjoy the book. And, even people who aren't football, if you just like a spy, if you just like a good spy story, honestly, that's what it's all about. I mean, essentially it's corporate espionage is what a lot of it is when you get to, some of the higher end illicit stuff that's going on, spying on practices and all that kind of stuff. But if you're a football fan and you just want to understand, I know most of us that are hardcore fans, we just want to understand the stuff behind the game more, kind of the inner workings. And man, I think that's really what sets this book apart, is because no one really understands the inner workings of the spy industry unless you're like on the inside of a team. And when I say on the inside of a team, man, you got to be a coach, because you got to be a coordinator or a coach, because everybody else has a very small picture of what is going on. Yep. And if you think that the whole team's going to know about, them spying, sending a spy to go watch another team, another team's practice at their stadium or at their practice field, heck no. That's kept in very, very, a tight group of people know about it, because they all, they want plausible deniability. They want the chances that information is ever going to get out to be as small as possible, because they know they could get in trouble with the NFL if it ever happens. So, man, there's very few people that know. I mean, I talked to coaches about things that I was like, I just realized that, at some point I was like, and I'm not talking high ranking coaches, but, like a secondary coach or something. I was like, I know more about this than they do. Like, I mean, and I was just going, wow, so I think there's a lot of really good inside information. I think for anybody who's a football coach out there, I know there's probably quite a few listeners who are. There's a lot of stuff that you can learn and be able to apply to either how you go about collecting information, a lot of it using permissible ways, or how do you defend against it? And, and I don't put all my own thoughts in there on it. There's, I kind of frame the subjects, but you've got literally the whole NFL's history about how teams went about collecting it and defending it, to be able to pick the brains of the smartest coaches that have ever been around the NFL, and to, pick up a lot of the tactics that they utilized.
That's some good stuff right there. I got nothing else but to say that. This is some good stuff right there, Kevin.
Yeah. So,
well, where last question, and then of course is where can the listeners buy your book from?
Yeah, so it's out there on Amazon, of course, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, basically any of the major book retailers has this thing online. It is out in hardback, on ebook and audiobook. It's not yet on Audible, which is, of course, Amazon's audiobook service, but it will be there shortly. But you can go on my website and see all the places you can buy the book. It's spiesonthesidelines.com. And that also has all my social media handles. I'm on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram. I'll give out my Twitter one because I know that's the one everybody loves. It's at Kev Bryant Author. So at KEV Bryant Author. And the last thing I'll say is my audiobook is about half the price of the regular book. So if you're looking for a good deal, that's definitely the way to go.
There you have it, listeners. That's the best way. I'll definitely make sure and give my review after I read it, and definitely looking forward to it. All the information that he just obviously released will be all in the course description below in the podcast. So you make sure that if you happen to miss his handles, they'll be on there as well. Excuse me, Kevin. First off, again, thank you for your service to this country. I truly appreciate it. I know many listeners, especially Coach George, who is a veteran himself, and Wong Lam, who's a big military supporter. I know that I'll vouch for them that they appreciate your service as well. And, thank you for your service. And of course, thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule and coming on the podcast.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. Serving was an absolute honor, and appreciate you having me on, Mike. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Likewise, looking forward to having you back here in the future, and we'll talk some more. Of course, I'll give you my intake on the book.
Okay. Sounds good.
Awesome. You've been listening to the Air Raid Attack podcast. Listen to us all major podcast platforms. Have a wonderful week and enjoy your weekend. We'll see you all next week.